Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm an American lay student of Ajahn Suchart, or Ajahn Suchart Abhijato, who's given me his permission to read his books to you for free. Ajahn Suchart's books and talks are always free. Any ads you may see or hear in this recording have been put there by the platform you are using to listen or view with for its own revenue, in exchange for letting us use their platform for free. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of names or words, and for any background noises, as I'm just making these recordings in my apartment with an unruly dog and in the middle of a city. We are resuming Beyond Birth today by Ajahn Suchart Abhijato, an autobiography, and we are still in Chapter 1, resuming today in the fourth recording on page 67. The title of this next section is Education in the U.S. I chose engineering because I liked math and did not care for subjects that require memorization. The first year at Fresno City College, I had to take some revision courses since I had been out of school for a year. Chemistry, because my grade was not high enough, English to improve my writing, prerequisites for the program that American students might have taken in high school, such as technical drawing, and other subjects that I never took before or needed to improve. Because of these additional courses, it took me 5 years to graduate. I was able to choose subjects to take 3 times a week, usually on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Some subjects were taught on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The schedule allowed 10 minutes in between classes so that the students would have enough time to go from one class to the next. With only 3 subjects, I was not in class all day, and the load was either heavy or light depending on the courses I took. After class, I would head for the library to study or to do homework, because once the weekend came, I had no time to touch books at all. Working from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., getting home around 2 a.m., and getting up at 10 or 11 a.m., it was almost time to go to work again. Even though it was not particularly tiring, it left no time to do much of anything else. In a way, it was good, because whenever I was not working and had free time, I began to feel lonely. I really didn't have any friends to spend time with. There were acquaintances or classmates that I spent a little time with, but no close friends like in high school. Later on, even when I shared an apartment with some classmates, we did not socialize much. The house was basically a place to sleep. We each did our own things. For me, I liked doing things by myself because it was easier. Being alone had become my habit. I did come across some bigotry in the U.S., which is natural in any society. Even though Asians were not particularly looked down upon, some people just did not extend their friendship or include me in their group. The next section starts on page 69, titled Lessons in Kilesas, Lessons in Dhamma. After I graduated from the Seventh-day Adventist Ekamai School, I paid no attention to religion. During my time in the U.S., my thoughts were more on the advances in the sciences. I never went to church, only to school and work. I did have some recreational activities, such as going to the beach or to the woods on my day off, usually to the Yosemite Forest, which was not too far from town. Sometimes I would spend the night at one of my colleagues' parents' houses, or hop on a bus that came to pick up young men at the college to be bussers for the weekend at the resorts. Once in a while, when extreme boredom set in, I would drive to L.A. to see Thai friends or travel along the coastal towns. Life is essentially a struggle to survive. One has to make a living and seek knowledge to develop one's life to be happy and comfortable. But these are just going the way of the body and of the kilesas. That is, when one has income, one will satisfy their kilesas and cravings. But this won't develop you spiritually at all. To liberate the mind, one has to come across Buddhism, which teaches generosity, dana, keeping precepts, sila, and meditation, bhavana. The thought to live by dana and sila never entered my mind, though the tendency to want to help and share with others and never take advantage of or hurt anyone had naturally resided in me. As for bhavana, I had a love of nature and a tendency towards solitude and didn't like to party, though once in a while I would join in on a Friday night jaunt into Fresno, the town near the university. They had happy hour with half-price drinks and free snacks, such as chicken legs, etc. I didn't go often, however, because I had to work and did not have much money for going out. My life was mostly spent studying and working, so I was saved from going astray. If I seemed to be a little bit of a hippie, it started when I was in the U.S. Before getting there, at the Seventh-day Adventist Ekamai School, we always listened to Western music. I was a fan of the Beatles, Elvis Presley, and Cliff Richard. My taste progressed from liking the Beatles to accepting more of the hippie culture when I got to college, where drugs were prevalent. Some of my housemates would offer marijuana, and I tried it occasionally. However, this happened during my last year in school, and I focused more on my studies so that I could graduate and did not smoke much. After finishing my requirements, I did not wait around for graduation. The school forwarded the diploma to me at home instead. I never regretted my decision to go to the U.S. I figured that I benefited from having lived in a different culture, seeing foreign lands, and having the opportunity to further my education. All was a bonus in life for me. I did not start out having a goal to graduate from college. I thought it would be a good experience either way. I got to meet both sides of humanity, kind people and not so kind too. Those who were kind invited me to join their activities, and those who were not did not. To each his own. The next section starts on page 71, is titled Traveling to Europe. When I finished school, it felt like a mountain was lifted off my chest. After 5 years in the U.S., all I wanted to do was go home. I sold my car, which I just paid off, to a friend from Hong Kong. With the $1,000 I got for the car, I decided to go home via Europe. At the time, students would go on group tours. The charter flight to Europe was cheap, $160, about half the cost of a normal ticket with fewer amenities. We only had boxed lunches during the flight. We purchased a second-class Europass rail ticket for $100 that allowed us to travel around 13 countries for 1 month. In the beginning, I traveled with 4 or 5 students from Fresno. We started from Oakland, near San Francisco, and went to Brussels in Belgium. After a few days with the group, though, it got to be too much for me. Each person wanted something different, and it took so much time just to settle on the place to go where everyone could agree. We had to vote for everything, so I decided that this method was not agreeable. I would rather just go alone and see what I wanted to, so I went off by myself. Traveling alone was pretty good. I made friends when flying or on the train or where I was staying. I liked the fact that nobody had to feel bad that they were forced to do what they did not want to, or be left behind. Ever since then, I have appreciated doing things on my own and being free of obligations. The next section starts on page 72, titled Seeing Europe. From Brussels, I took a train to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I stayed local and visited Rotterdam and The Hague until the month-long Europass rail ticket kicked in. Taking the train to Copenhagen in Denmark, I stayed 3 or 4 days, and then went up to Stockholm, Sweden, and to Oslo, Norway. Oslo was rather quiet, and no real uniqueness from the other Scandinavian countries that I had already been to, so I did not even spend a night there. Dusseldorf, Germany was next, so that I could check the mail forwarded to me via American Express. After getting the mail, I toured Cologne, and with the Europass, I could also go on a boat trip along the Rhine to see castles and beautiful views along the river. I spent a night in Mainz and took the train to Frankfurt, staying for 2 days and then on to Heidelberg, which was a beautiful and quiet university town. I went down to Munich for a couple days and left Germany for Austria, where I visited Vienna, Innsbruck, and Salzburg, then moved on to Switzerland, seeing Zurich, Lugano, and then Bern, the capital. I stopped by Interlaken, the mountain peaks, the Great Wall, and then headed down to Italy, Milan, Venice, Florence, Genoa, and Pisa. By way of Geneva, I went on to Nice and Monte Carlo. I ended up staying 2 or 3 days in Paris, concluding the trip by taking the train back to Amsterdam for the flight back to Bangkok. At first, I planned to stop in Barcelona, Spain, but I did not have a visa ready from the U.S. I thought I could get one in France. However, my French visa was only one way, and applying for a visa in France was rather troublesome because they refused to speak English. So I cut Spain from the trip. I traveled around Europe for a month using the Eurail ticket to take the night train so that I could sleep on the train. It was hard to sleep on the train, so I felt worn out a lot. If I wanted to stay overnight in a town, then I would go to a student youth hostel, which cost only $1 a night. How long I stayed in place depended on how impressed I was. I used a U.S. $5 a day guidebook for Europe during the trip. My meals usually cost only $1, so I actually spent only $3 per day. It was easy and fun. I arrived at a place, walked around, took photos, and then hopped on the train to another town. I used the guidebook to tell me where to visit and what to see. There is a quote next on page 74. I had the life of a traveler because I never had a place I could call home. All my belongings usually fit in a suitcase. When I left the U.S., I only had a backpack with me. That was all. It helped me make decisions about what to do more easily. There's another quote on page 75 next. I have been everywhere. When I left home, I went east, visiting Hong Kong, Osaka, Tokyo, Honolulu, and L.A. I wanted to return home via Europe, so I practically wore myself out traveling. I have traveled to all these places, and there really wasn't much to them. I have no desire to travel anymore, because I know that I've been there and seen it all already. The next section begins on page 76, titled, Returning to Thailand. The flight back from Amsterdam in the Netherlands to Thailand was also a charter flight costing $160. The plane left in the morning around 10 a.m., arriving in Copenhagen, Denmark in the afternoon to pick up more passengers. A mechanical problem kept us there, so we left around midnight or so. The plane was a small 2-engine caravan jet plane that needed to stop for refueling every 4 hours at Istanbul, Turkey, then at Tehran, Iran, and finally at Karachi, Pakistan, before arriving in Thailand. We left on Wednesday and arrived in Bangkok around 2 a.m. on Friday. After clearing immigration, I slept at the airport until daybreak to take a taxi to my Ekamai school friend's house in Bangkok. After having breakfast together, I left for the bus depot to go back to Pattaya, arriving on Friday afternoon. Getting home, I just slept through Saturday until Sunday morning when I got up and took a bus to town. On the bus, I ran into a couple that took the same flight to Bangkok, and in striking up a conversation with them, I found out that they were a Swedish couple who were stopping in Pattaya on their way to an embassy job in Tokyo. Amazed that we should run into each other, I showed them around Pattaya for half the day. There is a quote next on page 77. I used to think that going to study abroad was like a ladder that would give me a path to advancement like I had seen from others. I thought that I had to go down that path. Once I had done it, though, I realized that while it might be advancing, the mind did not develop in the process. The next section begins on page 79, titled An Extended Holiday. Since I still had $500 left after the trip back from the U.S., I was just taking it easy as an extended holiday. During this period of relaxation, I wandered about with no particular purpose. I saw Pattaya as a paradise for relaxing. I swam and suntanned. I also tried marijuana, but I only smoked it once or twice, not all the time. When one had mindfulness while smoking it, there would not be hallucinations, but sometimes there would be the effect of getting high and falling low. It felt like heaven when the drug kicked in. The mood is gentle, cool, and without tension, and one could let go completely. But once the effect had worn off, it was like being in hell. One is in a bad mood, feeling tense and anxious. Consequently, a drug addict would have to resolve this by using the drug again to get high again. As an avid reader, after swimming and sunbathing, I would read books. At first, I read English novels until I discovered Hermann Hesse, a German philosopher who wrote books about looking for spiritual fulfillment, which was different from most people who tend to turn towards materialism. Hesse wrote Siddhartha, which had been made into a movie also. However, the story was not about the Lord Buddha, but about an Indian man named Siddhartha and his friend named Govinda, who were both seeking a way to happiness. After a while, Govinda was ordained because he believed that spiritual contentment only came from religion. However, Siddhartha believed neither in being ordained nor in materialism, but in his own way. When he got married, he experienced happiness as well as sorrow. The story was very popular at the time among hippies because they were seeking a way to escape materialism as well. I read several other books along this line about having to choose between materialism and spirituality. The next section begins on page 80 and is titled, A Real Hippie. When I first came back from abroad in 1972, I adopted a hippie style of dress. I wore shorts or jeans with t-shirts that had all sorts of crazy things printed on them, with a hippie bag over my shoulder. Though I spent most of my time in Pattaya, once in a while I would go and visit a friend in Bangkok. One day I wanted some coffee, so I went into the newly opened Central Department Store in Siloam, where most people wore conservative business suits. For me, I had on my usual hippie-style duds, t-shirt, jeans, flip-flops, and a shoulder bag. My hair was long, which was not very common at that time. I sat at the cafe for a long time, but no one came to ask for my order. It occurred to me that perhaps the servers might have thought that I was a deranged soul, so I pretended to be a foreigner and called out, "Hey, come here, I need coffee." With that, the server came over to take my order, remarking to himself that, oh, he's not a Thai madman. He must have thought that I was Japanese, Taiwanese, Korean, or something. Similar situations happened in New York City. Some high-end shops would not sell to blacks, like in the story where Oprah Winfrey went to buy a handbag in Europe, and they wouldn't serve her because they did not recognize her and thought she was just a poor black woman. So most people tend to judge by outer appearances first. People who are not well-dressed are not valued, even though some well-dressed people are untrustworthy. We just have to know the appropriate attire, how we are expected to dress. If we do not conform to the expectation, then we might be looked at as if we don't belong. In reality, outer appearances don't always portray what is inside. A good appearance can hide a rotten inner being, or vice versa. And we're going to end there today on page 81 and begin the next section in the next recording on page 82, and it is entitled Considering Which Direction to Go. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time with Metta. Bye-bye.